Just want to look.
Sure.
I like these different. There's some sort of distortion. I don't know what it is. Last week when you stepped away from the podium, album would read.
I noticed that. It went way down. Because of those two. That drop.
I'm sorry, brother. I just can't.
All right, let us turn to page 10, the inheritance of the tribe of Judah, chapter 15 of Joshua. We're going to be page 10, and inheritance of the tribe of Judah, chapter 15, 1 through 63. 1 through 63. And last week we talked about, who did we talk about last week? There's two people we talked about last week. Remember the story of, I'm going to just say spies. Yeah, I'm going to just put that out there. Didn't even know what two people we were talking about last week. Yep, Joshua and Caleb. He was talking in chapter 14, right? Caleb had came to Joshua and said, what? How old was Caleb? How old was Caleb at this time? Add some more to that. How old was Caleb? Somebody start reading chapter 14 and verse 10. Chapter 14 of Joshua. You gotta read that. You can start reading in 7. This way it'll help.
From 7.
Yeah, verse 7.
40 years old was I when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to espy out the land, and I brought him word again, as it was in my heart. Nevertheless, my brethren, that went on with me made the heart of the people melt, but I wholly followed the Lord thy God. And Moses sware on that day, saying, surely the land whereon thy feet have trodden shall be thy inheritance, and thy children's forever, because thou hast wholly followed the Lord my God. And now behold, the Lord hath kept me alive, as he said, these 40 and 5 years, even since the Lord spake this word unto Moses, while the children of Israel wandered in the wilderness. And now, lo, I am this day 44 and 5 years old. As yet I am as strong this day as I was in the day that Moses sent me. As my strength was then, even so is my strength now, for war, both to go out and to come in. Now therefore give me this mountain, whereof the Lord spake in that day, for thou heardest in that day how the Anakims were there, and that the cities were great and continue?
Okay, thank you.
Oh, there's two more. You're just finishing?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Okay. That's our history. In the questions we answered last week, remember, who was Caleb? We found out who Caleb was. How long it took Israel to get the possession of Canaan? We answered that question last week. Why, judging from the context, that Caleb mentioned his strength. Can somebody recap that? Why did this old man talk about his strength?
Because he said he was as young as the wind keeps coming out.
Correct, exactly right. Now, just to add some more to this, how many people from Caleb and Joshua's generation, because they're old men now, how many people from their generation is still living? How many people from Joshua and Caleb's generation is still living?
Only the two of them. Just then. and-
Just then. Why just then?
Because the others then, because of what?
Okay, we can't do it. God walked them for how many years? So in 40 years, the people that said they couldn't do it eventually died off. Okay, so we get to Joshua and Caleb, we're marching across with the next generation over the Jordan River to get to the other side to the land of Canaan. There's only two people living that heard what Moses said, and those two people are who? Joshua and Caleb. And neither one of them is going to dispute the fact that Moses said what they said, or what he said, and gave Caleb what he told Caleb he was going to give him. Okay, so here we are. We're on the other side. Caleb comes up. He's an old man now. He's still ready to fight. He said, I'm just as strong as I was today than I was 40 years ago. You know what I'm saying? So I'm ready. I'm ready. Give me my land and let me go in here and do what I have to do. And that's pretty big for an old man. But what do you think the rest of the generation thought about that when he said that? What do you think the younger people thought? Yeah. Think about it. The story was told about 2 men, right? Israel loved to tell stories about their history. So from each generation, they heard the same thing over and over again because they always talked about their stories. Okay? So, you heard, hey, look, this was a tough guy. If you got somebody among you in your family that was a tough guy, Uncle Willie or Grandpa or whatever, didn't take no mess. These are the stories that are associated with him. When he do speak, you listen, correct? And if this old guy say, hey, look, I'm going to take this. This is my land. It was given to me. I think everybody else will follow suit and get him behind him, especially if he's strong enough to go do it. You ever had your grandparent at a picnic or great-grandparent at a picnic or an event or something raise up on you and snatch you and hit you for something you've done? Did you think they were weak? No, you did not, correct? You kind of figure, hey, that woman still got the same swing she had 40 years ago. She hit me that way then, and she's going to hit me like that again. So now. So, you kind of figure, hey, this is it, and this is what I want, and let's go and complete this and finish this. This old man still had the same fire in his bones that he had many, many years ago. And this is the land we finally got here. Let's get this over with. God is God. He was the same God then. He's the same God now. Okay, question 13. Describe the inheritance of Judah in terms of its borders. Remember, we talked a little bit about that last week. Brother Fitzinger answered the question. How big was the borders of Judah? We're in chapter 15 now. Verse 1. Do a quick reading of verse 1 and then tell me how big was their border.
It was vast.
Vast.
It was huge.
Extreme. It was big. And Judah's a big tribe. It was extreme. So Judah got a chunk of Canaan, correct? They got a chunk of Canaan. All right, who was Asher? I was hoping y'all would do a quick study on her. Who was she? She had to have some sort of importance of the Holy Spirit when they put her name. When they mentioned her. Who was she? Who was her dad?
What name did he ask? Who was
A-S-H, A-C-S-H, A-C-H-S-A-H. Who was her dad? We just got through talking about her father. Who?
Caleb.
Who?
Caleb.
Caleb. Caleb was her dad. Caleb was her dad. Okay, let me just give you a brief history on this, and I think you sisters would appreciate this. It's not much about her story, it's very abbreviated. Her father, Caleb, offers her as a bride, as a prize to whoever does the job for him. The job is a tricky one in capturing the town of Bridgeport from its Canaanite inhabitants. Presumably it was a fortified town which was being unfriendly to the Israelites. Othello, his nephew, took the city, so he gave the bride Asher. She asked her husband to ask her father for a field. We aren't told what happened. Suddenly, in the next scene, she is jumping off her donkey in front of Caleb. He's as surprised as us, the reader, and asks what she wants. She said, "You've given me land, and Negev, the desert land, give me the spring too." So he gave her land with 2 lots of springs. Have you ever went up to your dad and asked for something? You ever went up to your dad and asked for something you still married? How many women have done that? After you got married, you still went up, Donna put her hand up, you went up to your dad and asked your dad for something. Not many of y'all done that. Aaron has done that. No, you haven't done that. You know, you still married. You married, you just married, or you've been married, and you see your dad and you ask your dad for something. Does being married deprive you from asking your dad for anything? Still your dad, right? You're always going to be your dad, right? Okay, so you go up to your dad and you ask your dad for something. Did your dad give it to you? Gave it to you. Why do you think your dad gave you what you want? Did he tell you you should go ask your husband? Why do you think your dad gave you what you asked for? Still loves you. Still an apple of his eye. Matter of fact, dad kind of liked it that you came up and asked him for something now that you're married. You know, it's been a long time. You know, and what you're asking for, he can deliver. So Joshua, you know, okay, he gave her what she wanted. I mean, Caleb gave her what she wanted. So, you know, sisters, you know, although in this culture, women were deprived of a lot of things, the Holy Spirit is trying to get us to see that there are some things scripturally that we can hold on to when it's written, where we can understand that no matter what our society teaches and what our society is like, God is not like that. And women always, we keep seeing this as a reoccurrence in the Bible. Women always have and play a big, important purpose in what's going on at the time that it is going on. And the Bible ceased to help us as readers forget that as fast as these stories go, we still get these little things that come in, and we are able to enjoy some of the readings. You know, 85-year-old man, he's still as strong as today as he was when Moses he gave out the instructions for him to have that land. He demanded a cut of the land. He got it. It was a big land, and he took the land. And his daughter asked for some things. He set up something that you kind of figure like this. And I know a lot of daughters don't like this about their dad. But if you have a dad like Caleb, and there are some guys that want to marry you or ask for your hand, what will that guy judge that conversation by? If a guy is looking at a guy like Caleb, this is a military guy who is 85 years old, and he probably can take you and slam you on the ground. You know what I'm saying? Or run a sword through you. He don't look like he's 85 years old. He don't act like he's 85 years old. And he's just as strong now today as he was back in the day, as we can say. If you want to date that girl, approach that girl, marry that girl, what are some things you got in the back of your mind? What are some things you got in the back of your mind? Because remember, daughters didn't disrespect their fathers back in the day. In biblical times, they did what their dad told them to do. And if you've seen a girl or you've seen daughters of a guy, you look at her family structure. And back then, fathers taught sons how to be men. Not like today. Fathers taught sons how to be men. That man's last name meant the world to him because he was part of a tribe. He was part of a tribe that meant the same thing. These people had a heritage about them. They respect their heritage, and men were like that. My last name is all that I have. All that I have, and you don't disrespect my last name. People took pride in who they were and where they came from. So, if a guy came up to you in that day, and a guy wanted to take your daughter in marriage or ask for your daughter in marriage, that guy is going to look at you. Because that conversation has to be done with the father. So he's going to look at you. If you're one of those wimpy looking kind of guys, he's not even going to come up to you and ask you anything. He's going to disrespect you. But if you're a man of integrity and you are from a family of integrity, guys will notice that right off the bat with the daughter. With the daughter, guys will say all the time, you're a high maintenance. When a guy meet a girl, he said, you're high maintenance. So you're not like everybody else that I've been dating or everybody else that I go out with. There's something about you. So by the time you meet that girl's family, because when you meet that girl, she ain't ready to take you home. Girls are not ready to take these guys that they first meet home because they know how their home is. Now, to the father advantage and disadvantage, sometimes that's hard because most times your daughter knows and have a better judgment than you do, and you should think that the upbringing of your daughter has produced that, and you should cut her some slack. But it's hard for fathers to do that. So back in the day, fathers picked husbands for their daughters. Jacob's father picked somebody for him, sent the servant to go get her. When he seen her, she was perfectly veiled. But what were the requirements? So that servant knew exactly what the father was like. So if you come up against Caleb and you want to say something about taking one of his daughters, you got to be a tough guy yourself. At least you got to be respected by him. Because he's not even having a conversation with you. Now, that may be bad in the general sense with women, but with guys, with dads don't play that. That may be a strike that be against the dad, and dad said, you're gonna suffer for this, you're gonna learn. But that's just the way guys of wisdom are. And remember, this is a man whose integrity is so much intact that he went up against a whole nation about what they could do. Okay, so as this guy grew 40 years into his life, remember, he only grew in wisdom. So he didn't change. If anything, he got better. So you should respect somebody like that. So if he says, I need someone to take this particular area and I will give my daughter to that man in marriage, what kind of guy should that guy be? Will every guy raise his hand? Nope. Not every guy is going to raise his hand, right? All of a sudden, she don't look attractive no more. If you got to go do something tough for her to please her father, then, I got to pick another one. This is not the one. Because in order for you to have his daughter, what was the requirement? You had to go take something. You took it and came back with it, daughter's yours. And then what does that do for the father? In terms of you providing. I'll be willing to give my daughter up if the mission was accomplished. Why? This boy's tough. I'm not worried about nobody taking anything from him. If he took something that I told him to go take, which was a very heavy undertaking, and he came back with it, I'm not ever worrying about something happening to my daughter. because I know that he has the fortitude about him, the stamina about him to go do what was asked to be done for a job, don't complain about it, go execute it, and then bring it back to me. I'm not, matter of fact, that son-in-law would be my right-hand man. And I don't have to worry about my daughter worrying about anything. Because what kind of daughter do I have? Men like that have strong daughters. They have strong daughters. Women who are single parents, who are tough women, raise tough boys and girls. They have to. They have no choice. And there are some things about that upbringing where you would notice as you befriend them, possibly marry them down the road, you could say to yourself, yeah, man, she's just like her mama. She's just like her dad. Because you will know that that's the way they are. They are built that way. Okay? They're built that way. So being part of a particular tribe in Israel already let us know that there were some of that tribe that did what? They were fighters. There were some men in that tribe, or those tribes that Moses picked, to fight and defeat. So people already knew that. Okay, so as you go along, and I say it all the time, the story moves so fast. Remember who these 12 brothers were. And it's hard for you to recap what Jacob said to his sons when he were dying. He named the deficiencies in every one of his sons. But we forgot that because we're far from that story now. When those sons became tribes, remember the apple don't fall too far from the tree. Some tribes can do a particular thing, some tribes can't. Some tribes, as we move along in the story, going to say to Joshua, I can't do that. I'm all right where I am. I'm all right just crossing the Jordan. And Joshua know better than that. Y'all going to keep having kids, and the boundary is going to get too small, and then you're going to come back to me or go to another tribe and say, I want this or that. That's not going to fly, because once we set up borders, that border belongs to Dan. That border belongs to Ephraim. That border belongs to Judah. They're not going to have any room for expansion of another tribe. So God said, go take the land, go take the land. And God had his purpose for doing that, so people don't complain later on down the road. Remember, we talked about what? If you're a homeowner, where is your boundary in your home? Do you know where your property line is? How many people in your own home? Where's your property line? Do you and your neighbor know where your property line is? And it's established by what? What is the legal thing that they put down to establish your property line? Right. And it's called a what? Not a marker, but what is it called? When the surveyor comes out, and the surveyor comes out with his microphone and his ear things on, he goes and he with his blueprint and he prints out your land. He takes a metal stake, a metal marker, and he'll drill it into the ground. He'll take a stake with an orange paint on it, and he'll put it never stays, because somehow, some way, somebody will come along and move it. But the metal stake is drilled more than 12 inches in the ground. And if you don't see him do that, you don't know it's there. That's why he can come around and find everybody's property line. Okay, so that marker that he puts in the ground is your boundary for your four corners. So you can establish with your neighbor what belongs to you. Most of the time as neighbors, we argue about 2-3 feet. We argue about 2-3 feet. Oh, don't put those plants over there. Don't put a fence over there. We argue about those things. That's why we have to establish boundaries for us to live in. Some townships charge you taxes for structure, like fences. If you put up a fence on your property line, Seymour used to charge you taxes for it. They stopped doing that. You can put up what they call a live fence, which is bushes and trees. You see a lot of people put up all kinds of different kinds of shrubs and bushes that grow tall. Your neighbor will complain about that bush if it's tall and you don't maintenance it on their side. I have a burning bush on the right-hand side of my property. When the leaves fall on my neighbor's side, I'm responsible for picking those leaves up. It only can grow to the boundary. So when I planted the plants, I had to plant them 1 foot over on my side for growth on their side. And every summer, twice a summer, I'll go up, I'll trim their side, and I will rake the leaves up. Okay, there's a certain height that my neighbors can complain about. I can't wall them in. They can go down to the town and they say, I am walled in. I can't see, it doesn't look good. My property doesn't look good. So there are certain kind of trees that I can plant. On the left-hand side of my house, I have big pine trees. You see those. My neighbor on the left, love him because I block out all the stuff he parked over there. But if he move, another neighbor may say, I don't like that. I want them trimmed, or I want them cut down, or I don't want them growing on my side. Now, between my neighbor on the left and my neighbor on the right, who left and now rent the house out, the new tenants over there don't know anything about the property line. They just respect the fact that I do that. But my neighbor on the left, he and I have come to an agreement that he can trim the branches down if they grow too far over his side. Now, you look at, next time you're at my house and you look to the left, those trees are now 60 feet. Now, the branches grow every bit of 10 feet themselves. So we trim the branches on his side. So the branches don't grow all the way over and start shading out his property, because that property belongs to him. That's why God said you have to be neighborly. And it's hard for you to be neighborly when certain things are done on your property that will cause conflict. The same thing with Israel. Everything is all right until I get to my property line, my border, and all of a sudden y'all trying to squeeze over here or grow over here. Israel having that problem with the Palestinians today. They're arguing over border. We do the same thing. It's very hard for you to go from New York to, from Connecticut to New York and know that you're in New York unless you see that welcome to New York sign. You don't know that. Same thing with Massachusetts on 84. It's the same scenery. But unless the borders tell you that you're in another state, you're just driving to the next state. When we went to Canada, it didn't look no different to me. When we left customs and we went over the Canadian border, I looked around and I laughed. I said, it's the same trees over on the American side as it is on the New York side, as it is in the Canadian side. But Canada knows that's their border. America knows that's their border. And people will, get mad about certain things. You come from another country, you move to America, you buy property, you are living in the mindset of another country. The first thing happens with you when you get down here in America and buy some property and everything, you start having conflicts with your neighbors, because when you move in, you don't notice or don't care that in that neighborhood, in that subdivision, in that community, things are done the same way. What back in your country, it wasn't done like that. So now you got to have a conversation with your neighbor. If you have an open yard where you don't have a border, and you start cutting your grass lower or higher than your neighbor, it's going to look funny, but it's going to be okay to you. You don't care about that. You want 4-inch grass because you don't want to cut it every week. Well, your neighbor likes 2-inch grass because it looks like a rug. It looks like a carpet. It looks manicured. You may not like that. So now a conversation has to occur, and then your neighbor will come and knock at your door and say, hey, look, your front yard is throwing everything off. It looks uneven. Now, you from somewhere else where grass didn't mean anything to you. But you're now in a community where grass and the manicure property means the whole world. And your neighbor will call the town or call the city and say, he's not raking his leaves. He's not cutting his grass. He's not painting his house. My property value is now coming down because my neighbor is not maintaining his property. And that's a law. You can go and you can complain about that. If you don't cut your grass and rake your leaves in Ansonia, you get a $90 fine. The police department will come by and put a ticket in your door. You probably didn't know that. That's probably the same thing in Bridgeport. There's a noise ordinance. On the weekends in Seymour, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. I can't come out there with a buzzsaw, leaf blower before 7 o'clock in the morning. So these are things that you should know. These are the things that you should click and find out when you purchase property, when you're living in the city and living, because God commands that you be neighborly. So this may not mean anything to you until you put some kind of statute in your yard near the border of you guys' property and someone complain about it. You'll say that's none of your business. What I do over here, I do. I pay taxes over here, but you got to hold off on that comment. You better go down there and go to the town office and find out exactly what liabilities you have and what things you can do on your property that will allow you to be neighborly. Because if a tree falls from your side over to your neighbor's side, guess who's responsible for the cleanup on it? You are. Okay, so when you sit down and you do your homeowner's insurance, you got to be very, very particular of some of the things that you need to insure your home. Because the trees that you, on your property that you purchased when you purchased that house became your trees, not the contractor. That is your tree now. So boundaries mean a lot. Boundaries meant a lot then. Boundaries mean a lot now. We have border wars over boundaries. So understand, when Caleb said, this is what I want, Judah's going to get her chunk, we're going to move right on down to these tribes, and after it's all said and done, Joshua, we're going to walk away and say, as for me and my household, we're going to serve the Lord, knowing full well it ain't going to take long for these people to go completely off. Okay, so just know that although we move through the story so fast, historically, they are taking somebody else's property, and that's not easy for someone to give up. Some of these tribes, some of these neighbors are fighting them over that because they know when Israel come through, nothing's going to be left that they currently own. And God is going to show them the spiritual ramifications of that because they didn't listen to God. And God is going to use Israel to do that. But remember, that's not easy. That's not easy. So just know, here they come. And people are not going to run. They're going to defend themselves, but they're going to lose everything they have just because of the God that they worship. Okay, let's move down to question 16. What two tribes were descendants from Joseph? Okay. Who was Joseph? Son of Jacob. That's easy. If you didn't know Joseph was son of Jacob, then we moved too fast. Joseph is the son of Jacob. Okay? We're getting ready now to do what with his sons? With his tribe? Well, with his sons. Split their land. People are going to get their land now. We're going to finally get some peace in Palestine. In that area of Canaan, we're finally going to stop fighting. The blood is going to finally stop flowing, and we're going to get us some peace now. What explanation of the tribe of Manasseh is given in chapter 17, 1 through 2? Firstborn. What did Joseph tell his people, his brothers, when he died, what to do? Yeah, y'all don't leave my bones in Egypt. Don't leave my bones in Egypt. This is not where I belong. If the story is told, I'm here because of y'all. So don't leave my bones in Egypt. I'm a foreigner here. My bones are foreigners. Okay? So we get to where we're supposed to be. That's where I want to be buried. That may not mean anything to you. I'm a person that don't care where I'm buried. I don't have no particular place where I want to be buried. You may not be that. You may want to be buried where you was born or the country you came from. Amen? That may be your request. I don't care. Because I ain't going to stay there anyway. It don't make no difference to me. But that doesn't mean it's not important to somebody else. Important to somebody else, and they have you as the executor of their will. They want you to carry out their request. But To some people, it doesn't make any difference. The tribes are moving along. The tribes are getting their inheritance. We're going to get this land divided eventually. And once this land is divided, we're fine. We're fine. And everybody's going to look around and they're going to look at these borders and they're finally going to have some sort of thing that they can look at where they don't have to be portable. What was Manasseh's border? What did it look like?
On the east side of Bastrop had it as far as the upper
Next time you look at a map of the Old Testament, you may have one in your Bible, in the back of your Bible. Anybody have a map in the back of their Bible? Some of you, most people, if you have a study Bible, Mary has one. You look at the map in the back of your Bible, you'll see how this land, how this vast land was distributed. And you'll see the Old Testament times. Most of your Bibles have Old Testament land. And you'll see where everybody ended up at. And then you'll see just how your government do things. Your government is a mirror of biblical history. Because that land is still there. Europe is still there. The top of Africa is still there. Egypt is still there. Syria is still there. Libya is still there. These borders still exist many, many generations with different leaderships. But it's still the land. It's still the Bible land. And it was biblical land starting in the end of Joshua. You now have today what was started back then. And there's nothing overly excited about this particular section. It's just that they finally got the kingdom. And remember, that's where they were from. But that's not where they ended up at. Where they ended up at was somebody else's land. And then they became enslaved. God wanted his people back there because God is constantly, from generation to generation, trying to get the seed to the cross. And God knows exactly where he wants that to happen. This has nothing to do with Israel, by no means. But God wanted that seed to come right there out of out of Judah, where David sat on the throne. God wanted it to come out of Jerusalem. God wanted it to come out of that geographic location, and it did. But they wouldn't understand that. These people that we're reading about today in the Bible, they are historical facts that prove that God can work through people, all kinds of people, of all kinds of nationality and culture to get what he wants set up. And when Jesus comes, we in a beautiful, thriving society. And if you just take some time and just, as a Bible student, just study the wealth alone of Jesus' era, and you'll see that people had a lot of money. You'll see that these places that the Roman government conquered, they were just like colonialism. They will go in, see what resource people have, and they will first give you a chance to just give it to Rome. If you didn't, they would take it. And remember, the places where the tribes are now going are places that was already set up, built, and established. The only thing they got to do is go in and move the people that are in there out. And if God said take everything out, kill everything in there, he meant that. Because God has made the spiritual decision that these people are not going to listen to me. Don't leave them alive, because they're going to eventually wear you down. And we already seen that. It happened to the generation that came out with Caleb and Joshua. So just know that. Know that you and I have a responsibility while they're home to teach them. And when they leave, don't change. Your kids come back to you saying something entirely different than their upbringing, looking like they're crazy. Say what you got to say as mom and dad and keep it moving. That's all. That's all God wants you to do. And that's all Job did. Job prayed for those kids, although they were partiers and they lost their lives for foolishness. Job still was dad. And they knew that they had to be out from around dad to do that nonsense. All right, question 20. What was the complaint of the sons of Job? Can we have somebody read the whole entire chapter of 17? Don't worry about the pronunciation. Do we want to break it up in verses to make it easy? Make it easy? All right, somebody read the first 5 verses. Joshua 17.
And this was the lot for the tribe of Manasseh, for he was the firstborn of Joseph. The current of Manasseh, the father of Gilead, for he wanted Gilead and Bashan, because he was a man of war. The lot was made for the rest of the sons of Manasseh, according to their families. For the sons of Abizur, and for the sons of Caleb, for the sons of Azriel, and for the sons of Shechem, and for the sons of Hefer, and for the sons of Shemida. These were the maid descendants of Manasseh, sons of Joseph, according to their families. However, Zelophehad, the son of Hefer, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, and the son of Manasseh, and those sons, only daughters. And these are the names of his daughters: Mahlah and Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They came here before Eliezer, the priest, and before Joshua, the son of Nun, and before the leaders, saying, the Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance among our brothers. So according to the command of the Lord, he gave them an inheritance among their father's brothers. Thus there fell 10 portions to Manasseh, besides the land of Gilead and Bashan, which is beyond the Jordan.
Okay. Did the girls get any land? Why?
They promised it to the son.
Promised it to the son. Right? Promised it to the son. Everybody's making reference back to what? To who? What Sister Crystal just read. Who are they making their references back to? What person? And eventually who? Moses. Remember? You're saying, remember Moses this and Moses that? And the priest has to what? Intervene. Okay? All right, we'll stop there on question 20. That will be the recap for next week. And as you study this during the week, when you get the time, like I said, it is a large chunk of study, brothers and sisters, that you would have to make references to, and it will bring you back to their leadership, to the heads of that particular tribe, that you would have to do study to also, okay? We can't really do it justice in 45 minutes. It takes your own personal study to do that, so you know exactly how all this information came out, how it was filtered down to the tribes. And remember, Joshua is still their leader, and to a certain degree, like Moses, he had to figure out what to do with these people, because it is a commandment. They are there, and God wanted them there. But certain people are remembering certain things. Certain people are saying, well, I should have this and I should have that. As a leader, Joshua has to squash a lot of things, okay? Because, they see the promised land now. They got their foot on it. And the anxiety that this whole promise has caused these people as a nation is now getting ready to be, completely be done away with once they establish their borders. Now, they will have inter-conflicts from there, but it's be nice if you can just put your feet up after all this traveling and yelling and screaming and fighting and all this bloodshed. Okay, but to a certain degree, it's going to take a little bit of navigation by sound leadership to get these people where they need to be and get them at rest and get them at peace. And Joshua is going to do a very good job of doing that. But after he dies, it's going to hit the fan again. Okay, so remember, just out of this story today, remember this: be a good neighbor. State Farm is there. Just be a good neighbor because it's biblical. And if there's any conflict about your land or what you want to do, just knock on your neighbor's door and say, hey, look, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. What do you think? If you're living in a duplex, remember, you can't paint one side green while the other side is red without you and your neighbor agreeing to that, and both of y'all own the home. All right, so if that happens and you have to go talk to that person, you may have to get some legal stuff involved. All right, because that may be in your deed. It may be in when you sat down and did your mortgage and everything. It was in there that the house must be neutral white, and that's stated because for argument purposes, because people get creative. Maybe you live with a person that bought the house the same time you did for 5 years, and then after 5 years, that person moved and another person moved in, and that person want bright yellow. They want bright yellow, and hey, this is my half of this house belongs to me. Now you have to be a good neighbor. And you have to understand that that is biblical. You can't start acting crazy, yelling and screaming at people and stuff like that. You got to find a neighborly way to solve conflict, because that's biblical. Okay, and know these things. I always try to help you, to give you information, to help you with different kinds of cultural things and civil things that you need to be aware of as a Christian, because we are under a different kind of restriction. We have to always show God as an advertisement. So remember, we can't act like somebody else. When that neighbor's doing that, saying that, and going off that way, we can't react that way as a Christian. Okay, so we have to find a more diplomatic, godly way through prayer to get people to see, hey, look, I live next door to you, and these are not my intentions. But the same thing, hey, look, I live next door to you, these are not my intentions. Let's work this out. If you want the tree trim, I'll trim it. If I have an apple tree and it's falling on your side, I'm responsible for the cleanup. Okay? All right, let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, dear God, we thank you so much for this day, and we thank you for the rising up to it. We thank you, Father, that you found it necessary to love us in the manner that you did, that you called it Calvary. We thank you for Jesus' steadfastness. We thank you that he finished the task, and we thank you that you raised him on the third day to prove that it is truly, truly finished and done away with. Satan has no power anymore over mankind other than his trickery, but the very keys that Adam gave to him, your son successfully took back, and you now own humanity in the fashion in which you created them. We thank you, dear God, for our health and strength and peace of mind that was bestowed upon us this morning, the praise that we gave you as God, and the loving intent that we shall share with you this very day. Father, we thank you that you love us in the manner that you do, that we can imitate that to the world, and that from the waters of baptism, we are a changed people with a changed mind, with an action plan to show the world just how loving you are toward them, and the grace that you give for the forgiveness of sin. Father, as we finish out our day, let us do it in a manner that will please you, and in Jesus' name we pray these things. Amen. All right, thanks everyone.